Hey everybody, welcome back to Off the Grid Tiny House. We're on day 13 of our 50-day challenge. If you want to learn more about that, check out our intro video. On this episode, we'll be installing our first interior wall, the ridge beam, rafters, and blocking. We're going to be starting on the roof due to the massive amounts of rain we've been getting. Having a roof is awesome because if it's raining, you can work on the inside, and if it's sunny, you can work on the outside. So we're going to get it done, and hope you enjoy the video. The roof of our tiny house will be a 312 gable. 312 means that the slope of the roof rises 3 inches vertically for every 12 inches horizontally. And gable means that the roof will have 2 sloping sides and 2 vertical sides. The vertical sides are called gable ends. The type of roof you choose mostly comes down to how you want your tiny house to look. But the more sloping sides you have and the steeper that slope is, the better protected your tiny house will be when it comes to rain and or snow. A 312 roof is relatively shallow, but still suitable for our mild climate here in California. For snowy climates, you will definitely want a steeper roof. Also keep in mind that your roof slope will affect the amount of sunlight received by your solar panels. You can look at maps online that tell you what the optimal slope for your roof is for solar based on the longitude and latitude of your location. This is less important if you're planning on moving your tiny house around a lot. Once you have the roof design chosen, you need to decide how that roof will be supported. Gable roofs can be designed so that all of the weight of the roof bears only on the 2 long sides of the house, but I decided it'd be more balanced to support the roof with all 4 walls. This is accomplished by running a long beam down the center of the tiny house at the point where the 2 slopes of the roof come together, which is called the ridge. The beam is called a ridge beam. Unfortunately, the International Building Code doesn't include tables for sizing ridge beams, so these calculations need to be done on your own. I used a free software called Forte from a large West Coast lumber company called Weyerhaeuser to size my ridge beam. As you can see here, the software told me that 3 2x8s nailed together will be sufficient for spreading the load of the roof across the ridge beam. The ridge beam will spread its load to the 2 end walls and to 1 interior wall, as you can see here. All 3 walls use headers and jack studs to spread the load across openings in the framing to the bottom of the wall. If you want more information on that, check out episode 7. The rafters will also help to spread the roof load from the ridge beam down to the long side walls. Rafters can be sized using the span tables in the building code, just like we use them to size the headers and studs for the walls. Both the ridge beam and rafters need to be cut so that they form the slope of the roof, which in our case is 312. I chose this because we don't get snow here in Watsonville, California, and I wanted to maximize wall space while still keeping the maximum roof height under 13.5 feet Department of Transportation requirement. We will have 42 total rafters on our roof framing. The reason we have more on the ends, like you see here, is to act as nailing for the soffit and ceiling. We'll cover this in future episodes. The rest of the rafters are spaced out every 2 feet, just like the studs in the walls. Rafters need a special angled cut called a bird's mouth, so that they will sit flat on the top of the walls. You can see here how I have planned out all the measurements and cuts needed for the rafters. You can also visualize here how the rafters will attach to both the ridge beam and the top plates of the walls. Let's take a quick overview of what we hope to accomplish today. We will be first framing and installing one of the interior walls because the ridge beam of the roof will rest on this wall. Next, I will build small posts from 2x4s to attach the beam to the tops of the walls. I will then create the ridge beam from 2x8s as I showed and cut them to fit the slope of the roof. I will nail the rafters to the ridge beam and to the top plate of the wall and also nail some blocking in between the rafters to ensure they are straight and evenly spaced. Last, I will nail the subfascia to the ends of the rafters. The first step in getting our roof going is going to be building this interior wall right here because the ridge beam is going to rest on it. And you can see we've got some plumbing coming up in this wall. So we want to make sure that we line up our studs so they're not the same spot as the plumbing. We're gonna have one stud on the end. You wanna have studs at least every 16 inches for drywall to attach to. So you can see if we did 16 inches, we'd be coming up right here. So we're gonna have to cheat back, and we'll put one around like 12 inches right here. And then I was originally gonna have the door coming up right around here, but we're gonna have to scoot it over just a little bit because I'm a little bit off here. You can see why it's so important to have the plumbing just come up exactly where you need it to be, but it is hard when you have those strings. It becomes very difficult to get accurate. But you can see now how if you're not accurate, you're gonna have to move things just a little bit. So we're just a hair off right here, that's fine. But with the tiny house, there's not a lot of wiggle room, you know, so you wanna make sure you get it right. Just like with the exterior walls, framing the interior walls starts by clamping your top and bottom plates together and marking your layout in pencil. This interior wall has a door, which as you learned in episode 7, requires a header and jack studs. This header is a 2x10, so it can support the added load from the center column, which supports the ridge beam. I also sized this header using Forte. The header came up just short of the top of the studs, so I added some 3/4 inch plywood scrap to bring it up to height. Next, I cut out a couple of sections of the bottom plate for the plumbing stub outs and marked a straight line on the subfloor where the wall will go. After nailing the studs, header, top plate, and bottom plates together, I raised the wall, lined the bottom plate up with my mark, and nailed it down to the joists underneath the subfloor. Keep in mind that the subfloor is not strong enough to hold up the wall, so you need to make sure there are either joists or blocking in the subfloor framing to nail your walls down into. I used a level to adjust the wall until it was plumb, and then nailed it to my blocking. Hey guys, I spend my time and money making these videos for you because I want to give you the confidence and knowledge for you to build your own tiny house. In return, I'd really appreciate it if you could pause this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and visit our Patreon page. Your support ensures that you'll see more awesome videos like this one. If you do start building your own tiny house, you can use the links in the description below to purchase your tools and supplies, and that also helps out the channel. Most of the tiny house will have a cathedral ceiling, but the bathroom will not. This allows for a small storage area between the ceiling of the bathroom and the roof of the tiny house. To accommodate for this, I installed a rim joist on top of this interior wall. On top of this rim joist, I built a small post out of scrap 2x4 pieces and nailed it to a second top plate. I nailed an additional post in the center of both of the end walls. So if you nail straight down on these blocks are so small, you're nailing with the grain, they're most likely gonna split. So you wanna angle the nail a little bit, and that'll make sure that it doesn't split the wood. Our ridge beam will rest on these 3 short posts, but before we install it, we need to mark a layout. Just like we mark an identical layout on our top and bottom plates to ensure the studs that run between them aren't crooked, we want to mark an identical layout on our ridge beam and subfascia to ensure that the rafters that run between them aren't crooked. With the layout complete for both sides of the roof, it was time to hoist the 2x8s that will make up the ridge beam up to the top of the tiny house and nail them together. I attached the ridge beam to the tops of the short posts using a post cap, which is a piece of hardware that makes a really strong connection between the post and the ridge beam. And I also used some hardware to attach the posts to the tops of the walls. I used my layout marks to nail the rafters to the ridge beam and also nailed them to the top plates of the walls with a piece of blocking in between each rafter. This blocking is important as it will seal off the rafter bays for insulation, just like the top plate and bottom plate seal off the stud bays. Next, I snapped a chalk line from the first rafter to the last rafter and used my level to make a plumb cut, or vertical cut, at the mark on each rafter. This step ensures that the last step, nailing the subfascia to the ends of the rafters, makes a nice straight line instead of waving a little here and there. Every episode I want to take some time to talk about what went wrong, what I would have liked to do better, and just how I handled some of the frustrations I experienced. And this episode is just the same. There's definitely things that I looked at and was not happy with and that I would have liked to do better, and that's just natural. I mean, life's not perfect. a build isn't perfect. No matter how much you plan, sometimes things are going to go differently than you planned. So on this episode, one of the things was I used my measurements from my CAD design to cut the rafters. So, but a computer is not the same as real life. And what I would have liked to do is measure against the actual tiny house and make sure that the size on CAD would work with the actual tiny house. What ended up happening is because wood kind of expands as it gets wet and there was a lot of rain and moisture, the wood kind of expanded a little bit, but I was using my measurements for my CAD design, which those numbers just don't change, the links. So the rafters ended up being a little short, and so when I nailed them in, they wanted to kind of pull away from the ridge beam, and you can see, maybe about almost a 1/4 inch of some of the nails as they pull away. And this will be fine because the weight of the roof is just going to push them back in. There's not really a force that's trying to pull those nails out, and they're really long nails and they're strong. So it'll be fine, but it doesn't look very nice. And the good thing about this is when you're building, almost everything you do will eventually get covered up by something. So you notice our entire subfloor, no matter what mistakes we had there that maybe didn't look that nice, we can't see them anymore. And it'll be the same with these rafter bays, the rafters that we're installing. Those will eventually get covered up with insulation and our tongue and groove ceiling and the roofing, and we'll just never see them. So, when stuff happens and you're not happy with it, just remember it'll get covered up unless we're talking about trim or drywall or, one of your finished materials. You have nothing to worry about. On our next episode, we'll be installing the roof sheathing, insulation, drip edge, and underlayment. A lot of people think that it's the shingles that protect the roof, but it's actually the drip edge and underlayment that really provide that primary barrier to rain, and the shingles are just there to protect those elements. I hope you can all join me on our next episode as we install the roof sheathing, insulation, drip edge, and underlayment.